I'm Laura of Slice of Pie Quilts. In this video series, we'll be making projects for a nursery. Remember to use the hashtag MSQCKids when you post a photo. Let's get sewing with Missouri Star. I'm Laura of Slice of Pie Quilts here at Missouri Star, and we're going to make this Streamer Pocket Tote. It uses fusible foam for structure and 4 fabrics. You can make it in any 4 fabrics that you want. It has 8 pockets too. It's quick and easy. Let's get sewing. To make the tote bag, you'll need 1 yard of fabric for the lining, a ½ yard of fabric for the straps, 1 yard of fabric for the pockets, and a ½ yard of fabric for the front pockets. You'll also need 1 package of fusible foam, a rotary cutter and ruler, a square ruler, fabric scissors, a marking tool, I'm using a pencil, and sewing clips. Let's start by doing all of the cutting. I'm going to start with the lining fabric. I like to take my 1 yard cut and fold it in half and make sure that that folded edge from the quilt shop is all lined up. Then lay it on the cutting mat with that folded edge right along the bottom of the mat. I need 2 18-inch by 30-inch rectangles for this. So first, I'm going to cut off this raw edge on the side to give us a nice straight line. Now I'll move the ruler over to the 18-inch mark and cut that measurement first. So now I have 2 layers of fabric here, so I can cut the 2 rectangles at the same time. I'm leaving them folded, and I need it 30 inches wide this way, so I'm going to come up to the 15-inch line, making sure that fold is down here. That's the part we want to keep, and I'll make this last cut. Now we're ready to cut the strap fabric. I'm lining up that folded edge along the bottom of the mat again, and you can fold this over too, because we're cutting 2 at the same time. The straps are going to be 6 inches wide by the width of the fabric. You don't need to cut the selvages off. I'll first cut off on this right side, so we have a nice clean line on this side, and then cut a 6-inch piece. Now we have both strip pieces cut, and we're going to cut the pockets. I've taken the 1 yard piece for these pockets and folded it in half, just like we did the lining fabric and the strap fabric. And I'm going to line up that folded edge along the bottom. And this time I'm going to be cutting 2 18-inch by 24-inch rectangles. I'm going to cut the 18-inch measurement first. Since I folded the fabric in half, I'm cutting 2 rectangles at the same time. I'm going to leave the folded edge down at the bottom, and this one needed to be 24 inches. And so I'm going to come up to the 12-inch line, and as long as your fold is at the bottom, you'll cut a 24-inch rectangle. And you'll have some extra for a different project. Last, we'll cut the outside pocket. This is an 18-inch square, so I'm cutting that from the ½ yard of fabric, line up the bottom. This one has a pretty good straight line on this side, so I'm not going to worry about that. And I'm just going to cut up 2 18-inch squares. Now that we've cut all the fabric pieces, let's cut the foam. You need 2 15-inch by 18-inch pieces of foam. I don't like to fold this one in half because it's a little bit thicker, so I cut them one at a time. My foam is about 18.5 inches wide, so I do need to trim at least 2 sides. Now you've cut all the pieces for your tote, so let's take it to the iron. If you've cut the fabric like I showed with the folds, the accent fabric is already pressed in half, so you don't actually need to press that. So I'm going to set mine aside. But then the outside pocket fabric, the 18-inch squares, we need to press those in half. So lay it on your board and fold it with the right sides out. I use the tips of my fingers or my fingernails to scoot the top layer of fabric until they're all lined up. Then do the same thing for the other one. For the lining fabric, we're actually going to do it a little bit different. We need to fuse that to the foam, and half of the lining piece isn't going to be fused to anything. So you actually just line it up. Make sure the edges are all right to the edge. You don't want any of this fusible to get on your iron. You can double check too that you're using the fusible side with the glue, and then press it in place. Don't worry about the extra that hangs off of the side. See, so we've pressed the fusible only to half of the fabric. The rest of it just hangs off the edge. That's perfect. Now do it the same to the other one. Make sure that the glue side is up. The back should be really soft, but you can feel a texture on the glue side. You wouldn't want to glue your foam to your iron. Now we'll press the straps. Take one strap piece, lay it with the wrong side up, and press it in half. Go all the way down the strip like this, and repeat for the other strip too. Then go back to the beginning, open this back up, and now press the raw edges to the center crease line that you made. You might be able to press both sides at the same time, but it's okay if you can only do one at a time. Now go back to the beginning of the strip again, fold it in half, and press it one last time. Now I'll do the same thing with the other fabric strip. First, I fold it in half to give myself a crease line down the middle. Then go back to the beginning of the strip, open this up, and press each of the raw edges to the center fold line. You might be able to do both sides at the same time, or you can just do one at a time. Then go back to the beginning of the strip and do a final press in half. I'm right-handed, so I press from right to left. If you're left-handed, you might find it a lot easier to press from the left end of the strip first. Now that all the pieces are pressed, we're ready to sew. I grabbed some pink thread off of the thread rack behind me, and now I'm ready to start sewing. I'm going to start with the straps. We're going to sew all the way down the long side to hold the sides together, and then we'll sew down the other side just so it looks symmetrical. I'm going to sew with the side of the strip about 1/8 of an inch away from the needle. I just want to sew the sides together, and I don't need to use a 1/4 inch seam here. Right in front of the foot on the machine bed, I'm holding my hands, my fingers, so that I can hold the strap in place as it feeds to the needle. It's like I'm creating my own guide for the strap to go through. Then I'm going to turn the strip around and sew 1/8 of an inch from the side on the other side. Now we'll do the same thing for the other strap. I'm going to sew 1/8 of an inch from the edge and backstitch at the beginning. I like to position my hand here in front of the needle so that my fingers hold each side of the strap, so then I can just let the machine feed the strap through. I backstitch at the end, and then I'm ready to go down the other side. Just line it up about 1/8 of an inch from the needle, backstitch at the beginning, and then sew all the way down the length of the strap. I used pink thread so that it matches these straps here, but you could definitely use a color that contrasts and make it stand out. Now let's sew the straps onto the bag. We're going to start by laying the foam piece down so the fabric is right side up. The foam is here on the back. And remember that extra fabric? It's just laying up to the top. We don't need to worry about that right now. We're going to lay the accent fabric piece right on top, making sure that the folded edge is towards the top. Line up the raw edges on the other 3 sides and use some clips to hold that in place. I like to use a 5-inch wide ruler for this next step. You need to measure 5 inches from the side of the foam panel piece, and then we're going to lay our straps right along the edge. If you don't have a 5-inch ruler, you can definitely just measure from the edge, but this just really helps line it up nice. Once you're sure that the strap is lined up, then you're going to use pins to hold it in place. It's kind of thick to pin through, so I really don't worry about it. Just as long as I stab through the layers of the foam and the fabric, it'll be enough to hold it while we take it to the sewing machine. Now, once you've done this, we're going to move over to the other side and do the same thing with the other end of the strap. So place the 5-inch wide ruler here along the edge, and then lay the strap down and try to make sure there's no twist here in the strap. Then just line up the selvage edge with the bottom of the bag and pin it in place. The selvage edge can go right to the bottom of the bag. We're going to start sewing here at the bottom, right on top of the stitch line that's already on the straps, and we're going to go all the way up to the top of the foam, go across, and then go back down. Remember, make sure that your strap is not twisted right here. Mine is laying flat, so I know I'm ready to sew. Now we'll bring it to the sewing machine. Line up the needle with the stitches on the straps that you already did, and we're just going to sew right on that same line. I take the pins out as I get to them. I don't sew over the pins. I can feel where the edge of the foam is at, so that's where I know that I need to stop sewing and pivot. With the needle down, I lift the presser foot, turn, and I'm going to stitch straight across to the other side. Then I turn it again, and then I follow my line straight down to the bottom. Now we're going to do the same thing for the other strap. The tote bag kind of gets in the way with the machine here, so you just roll it or fold it and then push it under there. I can feel the edge of the foam as it gets close to the machine needle here, so I'm going to put my finger there and stitch slowly till I get right to it. Stop with the needle down, pivot, make sure it's all lined up under there, stitch straight across, and now stitch down the other side. Once you sew the straps on, take the outside pocket piece, lay it right on top. Make sure that that folded edge is towards the top, and then clip the raw edges onto the other three sides. Now do the exact same thing to make a second half. After you have both of the bag pieces made, we're going to cut a 2-inch square from all 4 corners of both pieces. Lay the square right on the corner, and then use a marking tool to mark the square. I'm going to use a pencil. I like to use scissors to do this step so that I don't cut too far with a rotary cutter. It's easy to make a mistake, so using scissors will help you to cut exactly right to the corner of the square. Now do the same thing with the other half. After all the corners are cut out, we're going to sew the 2 halves of the bag together. Place them right sides together and clip them together. I'm also going to clip the lining pieces together. It'll make it easier to sew. Now we're going to take it to the sewing machine and sew around all of the sides, leaving the corners open. We're not going to sew the corners just yet. And on the lining piece, we're going to sew across this edge, but leave a 4-inch opening so that we can turn the bag right side out. Let's take it to the sewing machine and sew. I like to use about a 1/2 inch seam for this, but lining it up with the edge of your foot is also fantastic. I slow down when I'm coming off of the foam onto the lining fabric. I just want to make sure the machine doesn't have any hang-ups there when I am switching from thick fabric to thin fabric. You may want to slow down when you get to the part where you sewed the straps. It's a lot of layers for your sewing machine to go through. So take your time and sew slowly. For this side, I started sewing on the lining piece first instead of the foam, just to show you it doesn't matter. When you get to this spot where it switches though from the lining fabric to the foam, just take it a little bit slow so your machine will know how to switch the thickness of the layers. Now I'm ready to sew that last seam across the top of the lining. This is where you want to leave the 4-inch opening. Don't forget that, or you won't be able to turn this right sides out. Now we're going to sew the corners. I like to start with the lining ones, and so take the lining fabric corner, use your fingers to spread it open, and you want to line up the 2 seams. So open the seam, finger press them open, and line up the seams. The sides should be at an angle here, and this corner seam where we need to sew should be a straight line. Once you're happy with that, take it to the machine and sew straight across the corner seam. I like to start a little farther than the angled edge, take a few stitches, and then reverse back to catch all the way to the edge. Now we'll do the same thing for the other corner of the lining. Use your hands to separate the fabric. I use my fingers to finger press these seams open, and then you want to line them up and make sure that the corner seam is a straight line. The 2 sides should be at an angle. Then I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and stitch with like a 1/2-inch seam here. I like to start a little bit past the corner when I start stitching, and then reverse to go all the way to this angled edge, and then stitch across, and then reverse at the other end as well. Now we get to do the same thing for the foam corners. This one has a lot of layers, so as you open it up, you want to make sure that you are between the outside pockets. Then, pull it apart, smash it down, and try to line up those center seams. There's a lot of bulk here, so use your fingers to press those seams open, matching them up, lining them up, and it should look the same as it did before. The 2 sides should be at an angle, and the corner seam should be a straight line. Don't worry about the rest of the bag. It might be up in your way. Just smash it out of the way, and we're going to stitch with the 1/2-inch seam right across the corner seam. See how you can see that I stitched right across there? I back stitched at both sides. This is exactly how the corner should look. Let's try the other corner. Remember, when you open it up, make sure that you are between the 2 outside pocket fabric pieces. You don't want to open it on the wrong section. Use your fingers to make sure you can get it nice and flat inside. Finger press the seams open, and line up those center seams. Once you're sure that this corner seam is a straight line, you have the 2 angled sides, take it to the machine and stitch your 1/2-inch seam. The bag might get in your way. Just smash it out of the way. You've sewn all 4 corners, so it's time to turn the bag right side out. This can take a little bit of time. It's best to be patient and work slowly. You don't want to rip any of the seams you've already sewn. Just pull a little bit at a time, and eventually it'll be done. stick your hand back inside the bag and push out any of the corners. The bottom pockets sometimes are turned down when you flip it in there. Flip it right side out. So just bring them back up into position. You're almost done. Now we're going to stitch this hole shut in the lining, and we're going to top stitch around the top of the bag. Let's go back to the sewing machine to do those 2 steps. Then you'll be done. You can use a matching thread to the lining fabric here when you top stitch this. I have pink in the machine right now. I'm just going to keep that in there to do this step. I'm stitching just right along the edge, maybe 1/8 of an inch in, and only right through where the opening was. It's just a quick way to close the lining so that your pennies won't fall through. Now tuck the lining into the bag. I like to use my thumb and my pointer finger to push the corners of the lining down into the corners of the bag. Now, let's top stitch around the top edge. I like to start at a side seam, and I'm sewing from the inside of the bag. So fit the inside of the bag underneath your presser foot, fold the rest of the bag out of the way. We're just going to do a few inches at a time. I'm starting on a side seam, and I want to line the top edge of the bag with the right side of the presser foot. Now I'm just going to stitch all the way around. When you get to the straps, be sure that you have them pulled out of the way. You wouldn't want to sew the strap down right here. As you keep going, just turn the bag so that the next section is ready to sew. That's it! Great job! You've made a whole tote bag. Now you know how to make a Streamer Pocket Tote. It has 8 total pockets. Check the pattern for how to make the handles even longer so you can carry it over your shoulder. I've used 4 fabrics, and I can't wait to see which fabrics you choose. When you post a photo on social media, use the hashtag MSQCKids so we can see what you make. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial from Missouri Star.
We hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you are not already part of the Missouri Star Quilt family, you can hit the subscribe button below so you won't miss a thing. And if you click that bell, it'll notify you every time a new tutorial comes out. See you next Friday.